Hi, Lubna.
Hi, Hawa. How are you?
I'm good. Feeling increasingly like we're living in very interesting times, and it doesn't seem like it's really letting up. And I think this episode will be focusing on the topic of dark forces. And Lubna and I decided on this topic because, as I just shared, I think we are living in very crazy, interesting times. And it seems to us that as everyone knows who listens to our podcast, we always have a sort of spiritual bent to any topic that we have. And while we were talking about what's happening in the world right now, particularly in the United States, in regards to just some of the things that, had been coming out the last week in regards to the Epstein files, even ICE, all these sort of tension, war, all of these things are happening. And we're sort of becoming increasingly aware of the sort of disturbing allegations, things that people in power in our country and around the world, it's not limited to the US. It seems clearly evident within these files that these are people in power across the globe who are very entrenched and well connected with each other, which isn't particularly surprising, but it's more just sort of the acts that we'll get a little bit more into, particularly around children, that I think is really disturbing and disconcerting. And in the conversations that we had leading up to this episode, Lubna and I were really trying to understand this this on a deeper spiritual level and sort of what we believe to be a sort of darkness. I don't think we feel, I think everyone is noticing that. I think people, the conversations, at least for me, that I'm seeing online is that what's happening on some level goes beyond the act of sex, right? The act of pleasure, there's something going on, right? And I think if we
Yeah.
look at it, we can look at it from a power perspective, blackmail, all these other things from a material perspective, but I think, we really want to delve more into the immaterial, the potential spiritual reasoning, consequences of this activities that we have sort of been forced to reckon with right now.
Right. And wonderful sort of framing, Hawa, because and we talked about this. I think this is an extremely difficult topic to talk about, let alone think about, which I feel many of us have been forced to think about it because of the release of the 3 million documents and from the Epstein file case. Before that, we people who are following the news have seen this case evolve, and we've seen bits and pieces about the stories of the things that happened and about the victims and the suffering and the pain and the planning that into it. For me, it seemed, at least at that stage, as almost an isolated case of an extremely perverted human being who is clearly been sort of positioned in circles of influence and power to blackmail very influential people when they are in compromising positions, engaging in these morally depraved, exploitative, extremely disturbing behavior around women and children. But then I think with the release of the files this past Friday, um, my intuition, more so than logic or research, took me really to maybe a more sinister place and trying to place the Epstein case and the information we're learning about it into a larger ecosystem that enables systemic abuse of women, but particularly children. Historically, today, I mean, this is not new in a sense that we've seen practices of abuse and exploitation, whether sexual or otherwise, of women. But I guess for me particularly, and this is not to say that this is acceptable or normalized at all, but I think what is emerging as extremely disturbing is the element that involves children of both genders, and how that is positioned in a bigger ecosystem of human trafficking, creating pain and suffering on such mass scale to feed what looks to me as almost unhuman desires. And I think that's the bulk of what I'm very deeply disturbed by. which is the unhuman element of it. So when we talk about the dark forces, people might think we're going into, like the mythical only, um, and many people can find it very easy to dismiss that argument, right? It goes into the supernatural kind of world when people think about dark or negative energies and forces. But I personally don't think about it in this way. And I'm sure, you'll share your thoughts as well. But I think there's an overlap between our material world and this immaterial world where many of these negative, dark forces and energies exist. And we as humans open up ourselves to these forces to come and intervene and use us to feed their desire for pain and feed and consume the pain that is being generated by us, by our actions as vessels for them.
Yeah.
And this is a very elaborate narrative around to explain some of it. And people can take it in a literal sense, or they can think of it as a more psychological, more metaphorical sense, whatever suits them. But if they look deeper into the explanation we're trying to give today, they will see that this truly explains the scale of the problem. They're not individual cases that are localized by region or nationality or religion, or there's definitely disproportionate representation among men as being perpetuators. So
Yeah.
maybe there's a conversation to be said there about their susceptibility to these dark energies that feed on their desires, and use that as a vehicle. But the longevity of this problem, it existed for centuries. This is nothing new. In fact, if anything, I would argue the secrecy is a very important pillar of that ecosystem that perpetuates it. The secret, I would call it double S, the secrecy and the shame. So the secrecy on the part of the perpetuator, so that allows them to hide the actions and support each other and blackmail each other and use it as a card to advance their interests in the material tangible world to get more power and influence. But then the other side of it is the shame that is fed into the world of the victim, especially children, because they're the most vulnerable, given that they don't have narratives in their head to explain the abuse in a way that would liberate them and make them healthy adults. They fall trapped, or they're trapped into a world of shame, mental illnesses, physiological and physical illnesses, and we've seen a lot of these victims suffer for a lifetime. So the kind of the thought that I want to throw out there is your reading of how systemic this problem is outside the Epstein case.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. For me, I have always believed, and I think many people believe this, but don't really are willing to kind of accept this. But with all the stuff that's been coming out in regards to these files, all of these leaders, the people that we've elected are a reflection of the people that, like, we are them and they are us. And in the sense, for me, it is mass. This is just the tip of the iceberg. This is not just an activity of the elite. I think we're not realizing the extent to which child abuse is rampant in the world. And to sort of, and I think that was always my hesitation in the beginning when it came to like Pizzagate, which ultimately I think many of these conspiracy theorists were right. I always knew from a historical perspective, the behavior of the elites, this is something that they've been doing since the beginning of time, right? Like, I don't think this sort of ritualistic, being well connected, child trafficking, rape, sex trafficking, this is like nothing particularly new, as disturbing as that sounds. I think my frustration is, again, I always say this, but in the US context, we've had the Catholic Church scandals.
right.
We've had Penn State scandal. We've had Michigan State. I mean, this is a part, child sex abuse is a lot more normal than I think we're willing to accept. The abuse of children. It doesn't even have, it's physical, sexual, etc. And I think the interesting thing to me about all of this is like we like to put our leaders on a certain pedestal. I think we always put some pressure and expectation that they are better than we, but no, this is a mirroring in some ways to me of what's happening. And I think we really need to, and I think the element of like blackmail too. I mean, we don't have to get into that part. Let's just focus on the child abuse. But for me, it is deeply, it's just this is more of like a patriarchy question too. This is more, I'm more focused on, I think when this was all coming out, Lubna, I was more concerned. I was more like going back to my old radical feminist days of like
Yeah.
borderline being like, I hate men in the sense that is it a question of access? Is it a question of is there something about men and not all of them, I don't believe all of them are like this at all, but I'm just saying the level of which is just so many men in these files. I mean, there's just not, you can't even compare. It's like all men basically are the perpetrators, except for a few number of women. And obviously, the perpetrators in regards to the women are more like the co-conspirators, the women who facilitate. They might not be committing the act with these children, but I think their souls come into question too, even if they're just sort of supporting the people who commit the act. So for me, it was multiple things. It was just like, wow, this is just finally, why are we as a people, when it's the elites, we freak out that they're doing this? But this is like, to me, this is sadly a very normal thing, in terms of the lack of respect that we have for children. But then going back to the sort of spiritual element of it, I do think that, yeah, there's something to be said about what is going on? Like, what is going on that these perpetrators, what is it about children? Like, what is it on a deeper level? What do you attain when you commit these acts on such a level? Like on all levels, whether it's lower class,
Yeah.
middle class, upper class, like what is happening? And particularly like, again, I know we want to focus on children, but it's like there's a lot of allegations of murder, like killing the kids, eating the
Right.
kids.
Right.
Like it's
Yeah.
not just about the sex, like it's literally or the rape, like it's or the active sex. It's something about child's innocence. I think there is something because they always say in spiritual, people always say like in some of the spiritual work that I've been doing that children are the closest to the divine. They're fresh,
Right.
like
Yeah.
when they come from the ether and they come into earth, they are the closest thing to God. They're so innocent and pure, right? And as a result, that's why they should be so immensely protected, right? Like that. And how do we, and there are all these different ways of how do we go back to that, even as adults, like how do we go back to that childlike state? We're always figuring out how to go back, right?
Yeah.
As we
Hence
get
the
older.
obsession with longevity and youthfulness. And
Exactly.
um, to
So,
clarify one point, so you
sorry,
said
yeah.
that the elites mirror us, and you said it's not exclusive, those abusive practices not exclusive to any particular socioeconomic class. So are you saying that if a person, maybe particularly a man, we're not
Yeah.
sure, but if they're put in a position where they're susceptible to the circumstances that would bring out that type of nature in them, they would commit that act? Is that what you're saying, more or less? Like, no one is above this, no one,
No,
or
I think
are
we
you
have to be
saying it's
careful. Yeah. Sorry.
no, no, yeah, or are you saying it's just like it's widespread? Everyone, as in like from different socioeconomic classes, people are providing the supply of these children. Where are these children coming
Yeah,
from? They're not
yeah.
the
Poor
kids of
kids.
like the Ivy
Yeah.
League kid,
No, no, no. Yeah.
they're coming from somewhere. So are we saying that it's a demand and supply? So it's not just an elite problem in that sense.
No, I don't think it's an elite problem. Yeah, that's my whole fundamental. I think it's
Right.
more dire and depressing and it's just it's prolific. It's
Right.
so normal and that's what's scary to me. I think this to me was just that to me is what's really like the disturbing thing. There's the Diddy accusations. Diddy was
Right.
involved allegedly, in human trafficking, like all of these types of things. So this is what I'm saying, like this level of abuse of children in the United States, around the world. But again, I'm just speaking about my country. Like this
Yeah.
plague abuses children on a profound level. And even in elite circles, you know how many women are still abused by their family member? They're not protected. They might be, I think And I think what I'm trying to say is ultimately we are all susceptible to these dark forces. Like we are not, if
Right.
we try, like ultimately what I'm saying is it's a very human thing that's happening. This is a profoundly societal human behavior, you know? And you hope with the way in which you're raised in the community and the family that you have, you're lucky enough to not be a victim of that, right? And but it does seem to me that this is just we are at the tail end of a very dark time in humanity, right? Just the level of abuse, the level of corruption. Um,
So you think the ability to abuse is innate to our nature? Because you said it's a very human behavior.
I don't know if it's innate. I think it is a possibility. It is absolutely a possibility, right? It is.
I think that's where
I,
I'm
I
struggling.
don't know. Like I just because I don't want to act
I'm
like I
deep.
would be. Of course, I would not do these acts, right? Like that is a given. But it goes back to what I said about opportunity is the differentiating factor opportunity. I'm not in these elite circles. I'm not a man. I'm not ruled by my sex organs. You know what I mean? I'm not like I don't have these tendencies and I have the knowledge. I have like it's so difficult to say because
I
I
think
just
there's,
think that like I
yeah,
guess for my thing is yeah, the Epstein Files, the elite was disturbing to me. I think it's been disturbing is how I feel. And it is this tendency of there is this thing in us that but I also don't want to be this type of person who says like I feel like we are all susceptible to these dark entities. And even like I had given you the example earlier before we were when we were talking of just like those moments of rage that I've had, like moments of where I have like totally gone like blacked out rage in a way that was just not normal and I didn't know where it came from, yelling at a family member or a friend back in the like when I was just and how that doesn't happen now because of the significant amount of like shadow work and inner work and all this stuff that I've been doing that I hope that like I've had to do a lot of work to make myself not susceptible to these dark forces that play out for me
yeah,
in a way in which I verbally assault someone. Like, and that's cruel. Like, I've been cruel to people in that way. It might not
mm,
have been physical, but I have had a moment or two in my life where I have said things that have hurt people. And I was like, and I'm not, I also want to clarify, I think for the both of us, it's like we're not attempting to make excuses like, oh, a spirit comes in, it wasn't me. It's like I still think you have to
yeah,
take
yeah,
individual responsibility for whatever act you commit.
100%.
So it's
Yeah.
not about that. It's more just like what is, particularly in the case of children, I do agree with you. Like there has to be something beyond, yeah, like they were killing them, they were eating them. There was something going on a spiritual level that we cannot explain, that and we have to have that is what's, yeah, like I'm making it more political and economic, but like you're right. Like there's stuff going on that is beyond the pale, like that is just something beyond what we have been taught and understood that we have to tap into and
Right. Yeah,
understand
because I
so it
agree.
protects children in the future. And I think there's so much ignorance around consciousness. That's the problem. Like we're not like even you and I are only in our how many years are we on our journey,
Right.
Like
Yeah.
and we are the 0.1% girl. Like we are not even tapped in. Like we are
Mm,
such a minority, unfortunately.
yeah.
Um, because religious people do that. Like you said earlier, this wasn't limited to a particular political affiliation,
At
race,
all.
religion,
Or time, like
yeah, or
across
time.
history, like human history, you see different civilizations even bringing that as a ritualistic practice into
Yeah.
their culture. So it's not as we think of it as an abomination, but we are at a stage of history where now we view it as such an abomination.
Yeah.
But, we all know like the Aztec, Incas, ritualistic sacrifice of children and infants was practiced, but
Mm.
also in Mesopotamia, Levant, like the ancient Near East, and a lot of there is a mention in the Bible and the Torah, specifically I think Baal, which is a Canaanite, if I'm not mistaken, deity that after the Abrahamic religions became all of a sudden a demon. But before the Abrahamic religions, they used to ritualistically sacrifice children to obtain abundance and power and protection. So it's, and when we say sacrifice, when you exploit a child physically, sexually, emotionally, otherwise, you are sacrificing the child. There is there
Right.
is there is you're robbing this child of their selfhood, of their integrity for a lifetime. There's no coming back from that for most children. So maybe it took a different shape and color in today's world, what sacrifice looks like. But I would argue this existed throughout history and continues to exist, as we've seen now in the Epstein case. But going back to a few points you made, so about the opportunity, you mentioned that given the opportunity, some people might engage in such behavior. I totally agree, and I would add obviously it's complex, and there are other factors. As I forgot his name, the psychologist that did a lot of studies after World War II to try to understand how lower ranks in the Nazi army followed orders to commit the Holocaust. And actually, he was based in New York. He was at Stanford, I think, and then based in New York and through CUNY, the New York school system, university system, where and that was a very impactful study that he did, that we follow orders, even if it means harming others. Even like sometimes as human beings, regardless again of educational background, gender, socioeconomic status, like you can add as many variables as you want. There's something about conditions where you are in a lower rank and someone with more authority than you are gives you an order and assures you that you have to follow the orders, and when you follow these orders, you're going to harm someone. You hear the harm, you see the harm, and most often people follow the orders and continue to administer electric shocks, as in that particular psychological study happened. They administered fake electric shocks, but they would hear the fake patient screaming, yelling, and they would continue because there is someone in the room in a lab coat telling them with an authoritative voice, and he looks like he has authority to continue with administering electric shocks. All of this to say, I think to add to the mix, not just opportunity, I would say definitely also if there's a structure of compliance and you have to comply. So in the particular case of Epstein and the people in that network, I'm not sure what levers are being pushed that compliance is part of it, or following authority, or blackmailing. Again, not to excuse any of this. We're just saying when we're talking about, particularly now, the point I want to get to, which is the abuse happens in different socioeconomic classes. It's not just function of wealth, in my opinion.
Yeah, same.
So I looked up a statistic that is very depressing. In 2024, there were around 350,000 children were reported missing to the National Center for, I think, Missing and Exploited Children.
Yeah.
I forgot the actual name, but around 95% of these cases are runaway kids. So these are kids that because of lack of care or abuse in the household. So unlike maybe what common or pop culture make it seem like abduction and kidnapping is an external evil that is happening outside the household, and we have to be wary of a lot of the abuse that leads to these children exiting what supposedly needed to be a safe place for them into the outside savage world are cases where the abuse is internal, is domestic.
Yeah,
so
always, yeah.
Yeah, and the trafficking as well, like the actual active project of selling children, trading, exchanging, extracting monetary value. And again, this is not exclusive to the US. Many places, especially in overly populated countries, this has been revealed as a practice for people who want to make money, and they're very desperate. And again, it's very odd for me even like to try to explain because in my head there is no explanation whatsoever to engage in that behavior. But as the studies from NGOs have shown, so it starts in many cases in the family, the lack of protection, the active abuse that pushes these children to fall in the hands of predators.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. It's not exclusive to a particular segment of society. It just happens that a segment of society can afford it and can afford the hiding of it and the secrecy and engaging and paying for it and engaging in it in a systemic way. But there are actors in society that belong to not so affluent parts of society that are enabling that system. So it's an ecosystem that is not supportive of children. And now with digital and social media, the danger is exponential
Yeah.
because there's direct access to children. Um, so yeah, going from there to I guess the spiritual angle that you talked about and how um we are susceptible and methods of protection. I think this is very real. I think I've always thought of it as, like almost mythological about, protecting yourself, especially the way I was raised in an is predominantly Islamic tradition. You read the Quran, you do this and that. It's almost mythology in so many ways that these things will, these practices will create a shield, will protect you. But as I'm growing older, I've done some spiritual work as yourself, I'm realizing there is something about in the energy world where we need to do this kind of work. Um, Trying to protect ourselves from being susceptible to influence and negative influence that would consume us. And I want to know from your experience in your practice, and you mentioned the anger that could sometimes make you forget yourself for a second. What, in your experience, what worked for you? What do you think spoke to your soul and helped you understand that this is a protection mechanism for you to be your higher self?
A lot of it was just some of the studying I've been doing over the last couple of years around different levels of consciousness and also sort of my beginning stages in spirituality, which is sort of the superficial stuff around like law of attraction. Like I really was like bottom of the barrel new age for a bit. And there's validity to that. As I've shared with you, I think there was some value in learning all of that to get to where I've ascended, which is more like esoteric knowledge and, sort of hidden knowledge that's sort of connecting me more to my inner self and my soul and tapping a little bit more into that. So I have to say the origins of that were really superficial in the beginning. It's like law of attraction. How do I attract money, the job that I want, da 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 da. But even in that studying, there was a lot of stuff around integrity work, like, the four sort of what are the four laws that I read? One of just like a lot of that information was always around positivity, like
Mm.
putting yourself in a calm state, putting yourself where understanding that negative emotions have their merit. It's not to suppress or repress those emotions, but those are not states you want to stay in because it puts you in because I've been depressed, I've been anxiety ridden, I've been in those states to the point of like medication, right?
Yeah,
And I was just seeing that the feelings that I had and the negative emotional state that I was in was manifesting into negative reality for me. Like I just
yeah,
was like, something isn't adding up. I'm unhappy and my world is sort of miserable too. I'm not happy in XYZ. So then as I was doing more of this inner work and I initially started with this superficial new age stuff, which had its merit. And I say that because I think it got me to where I am now. So I always want to give
mm,
appreciation to sort of the things that I've learned because it's like, okay, if I hadn't gotten there, I wouldn't have gotten where I am now and where I hope to go further in the future. So anyway, all of that was always talking about like energy work. A lot of it was just meditation, yoga, like always putting yourself in a positive state. Always, and even the many religions talks about this, spiritual practices, whatever, but the importance of being and always living a life of gratitude is a common theme with a lot of this stuff. And so I guess it was that. It was
mm,
just focusing on energy work, my interest in consciousness, soul work, all this type of stuff led me down this path of understanding that, negative emotions create negative realities. They also are a telltale of something's wrong. It isn't to repress it, but it's like
yeah,
if I feel this way, what is happening? Something I'm not going in the right direction when it comes to my purpose or my path. So it is a signal post of some sort,
mm,
but you can't
mm,
stay in it. Um, and so I think that's where it came down to for me is like, I don't want, I want to be in a peace. And when you're in a peaceful, positive, emotional well-being state, and treating people with love, the emphasis on love, like the importance of love towards yourself and towards others. Um, but I also can't deny on another level, like growing up in the family that I did, which was very protective, very
Mm,
supportive, having that sort of environment in which
mm.
I was able to be safe. Um, I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that's what it really comes down to on some level. How about for you?
I don't know if I've mastered any of this at all because I realized with this Epstein situation, my system became overwhelmed and I didn't even read the documents. I didn't
Yeah.
dive into that. Some people did that. They've heard the audios, watched the movie, the videos, the images, read the emails. I cannot even imagine what would happen to me if I do any of that. And I'm saying not that I'm not spiritually or energetically protected, but I pick up sometimes, and this is my sort of self-analysis, but it seems to me I pick up on mass pain
Mm,
or what I perceive as pain that is occurring around in the world. Um, Another example that comes to mind is Gaza when the starvation happened, and definitely that affected me deeply. Sudan. Sometimes when certain, and it's not localized or in a particular region, but when it's brought to my awareness, I'm almost consumed by the pain that I imagine that
mm.
the victims have felt. Um, so there is work that needs to be done there because I think I need to disassociate, for the lack of better word, or create that boundary where I can empathize from a distance or not allow it to energetically consume me in that way because it takes me nowhere. It's just
Yeah, no, it does.
literally
Yeah, unfortunately that,
yeah.
yeah, it doesn't. Yeah. Even if it's obviously
Um,
well intentioned and you just can't control the darkness
oh
of it all and the disturbing,
no,
yeah,ness of
it's
it.
overwhelming because what it signals to me on a more macro level, systemic level. I don't think of them as just one incident, whether it's war or man-made famine or um, you know, scandalous abuse in networks of sex trafficking. It's what we are doing to ourselves as a society and to the most valuable part of us, which is the children. Um, so to me, that is just every while and then when I come across these news or hear stories, it shakes me to the core because it almost wakes me up from my hibernation to remind me of what society is capable of, what we are capable of.
Yeah.
And as easy as it is to dehumanize all these people, as we've discussed earlier today, it's not that simple. It's
Yeah.
not, it's a complex situation where there are multiple factors and conditions, including innate, internal to the person, but also external that enable that abuse. So,
I think it's also for me it just confirms to me like that we're in like the dark ages. I really do believe it's just as we become more tethered to this world, the material world connected to it, the money, the war. I mean, we are just so focused on this life, the pleasure you want now, the desire you want, and everything is just how do I have what I want now, 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 now? You know, how do I get rid of it? How do I and, like I just think from a spiritual perspective, I'm really recognizing that I think it's the Buddhists or the Hindus say like they always say we're in sort of different cycles. I think the cycles range from millions of years. And within
mm,
we're in the Kali Yuga, which is essentially the last of I think six or seven cycles. And we are at like the last in we're in the tail end of the Kali Yuga, which is that we're going to become even this is why you're seeing like technological development happening rapidly. Sort of everything is just about how do we become more and more material being how do we get stuck in matter, how do we still stay on this planet, right, like keep it going. I just think everything is just about our base desires. Everything we're living through right now, to me what we're talking about is all lower self like behavior, just base, like, let's just sex, killing. I mean, we haven't evolved. It just seems like we're getting progressively worse from a human civilization perspective. Even if there are pockets of societies and groups of people that are fine, I think as a whole, what we're seeing is sort of the beginning of the end of something. And something new, I hope, arises from that. I don't know if we'll be here for that, not in this incarnation, as they say. But I think this abuse of children, it's just like this, like, to me, it's like if we both, if you agree with me that we believe children are the closest thing to the divine, the source, God, and
Absolutely.
yet there's so much prolific abuse of children. I mean, we're like, it's like an inverted sort of world we're living in on some level from a spiritual, like we're almost like far too far gone. And when I say collectively, not necessarily individually. I think individually
Yeah.
we're not, but I think collectively we are absolutely kind of far gone, unfortunately.
That's the very difficult thing to work with, which is to reconcile the work that people like you and I are doing, and we are not exceptional in what we're doing, which is the spiritual work, trying
Mhm.
to elevate ourselves and protect what is worthy of protection, particularly the planet, the creation of the divine, and the children, which is the purest of the
Yeah.
purest type of energy on this planet. So, how do you reconcile the work that the few of us are doing with what the majority is doing, which is the systemic, degradation of the soul, the heaviness, the clinging to the material. We're becoming
Yeah.
heavier and heavier as a
Yes.
collective.
Yeah.
So I think that the few can help the majority elevate. Um, and I'm saying few and majority, I don't have data, obviously, on this, but it's the sense that we're getting because it's easier to fall into the trap of consumerism and the material than otherwise because it's all around you and we're socialized to normalize it from a very early stage in our lives. And in particular, the ultimate goal that many people have is gain more money, accumulate money, 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 money. Why really is to just buy and purchase and acquire more and more of the material. So I think a lot of the people who are doing the spiritual work can help raise the awareness through their being and less about being preachy. Because I think also a
Yeah.
lot of it is how we exist in the circles that we exist in, how we bring our presence, how we treat other people, how we want to be treated. A lot of it is the modeling that innate to just our behavior, any human's behavior. And I think the preaching part doesn't work very well because I think it's a very complex way to elevate one's soul. There is no one particular way. Some people, the Buddhist practices work for them. Others, it's mystic Christianity. Others, it's Sufism, Kabbalism. Like, so there are different ways and different schools and methods to reach the same point, which is elevate your soul, make it resonate and connect with the divine more frequently, more deeply. So to preach that is is difficult because these schools of thoughts already exist. It's not the lack of them.
Yeah.
I think I think it's translating them into daily practice and committing to that and resisting the temptation of the material world because it's around us. And all the signals that we have to validate us center around materialism and less so about spirituality and being a better version of ourselves or a higher version of ourselves. So that's what I think we can do as our role. What are your thoughts around
Yeah, I
our impact?
agree. And I think it's all about practicing what you preach on a small level that because I firmly believe that it starts with you, you as in me, just it starts with the individual. I think it's going to be, I think, you know, really for me, what I'm realizing is that I don't know if we can focus on society as much anymore. Like, I think it really is a sort of individual endeavor, and you live by what you practice, and each interaction that you have with another person should be as honest and as sort of yeah, as honest and as kind and as full of love as it possibly can be. in the smallest or bigger ways. One example I'll give you is I've been watching a lot of near-death experiences, as you know, and
Mhm.
almost all
Yeah.
of them collectively say is that, when they go to the other side temporarily before they come back, many of them are sort of seeing a movie of their life and all these different interactions that they've had, the bad things that they've done, the good things that they've done. And one woman that I was really fascinated by that was talking about her story mentions how, she didn't even remember this homeless woman that she had met or this woman who was struggling and she had just given her $1 and how that small act changed that woman's life. It's just that small act and she was able to see in the ether or the other world that she was in how she was able that woman was just so down on her luck, no one had believed in her. This random woman that she saw for 5 seconds listened to her. All she did was listen to her for a few minutes, gave her what she
Mm.
could and left, and it just changed her life. When she was nice to another person at the cash register, all these little things that you think don't matter have a lot more weight than you realize when you touch a
Yeah.
person, even if you never see them again. So that's what
Yeah.
I'm sort of trying to do now is how do I just be kind and loving and choose to not think, is this person out to get me? Is this person, that isn't to say not have your boundaries. I'm talking about just interactions with strangers, just
Right.
choosing love and compassion and gratitude in every interaction that you have. Just be in a positive state, not positivity. I'm not talking about toxic positivity. I don't want people to watch this and think I'm like, oh, Hawa's just saying be la la la. No, that's not what I'm saying. But just feel
Mm.
what you feel. Don't allow what another person does to you impact your, well, like I just think I can't, there is this
Yeah.
increasingly part of me that is just like, I got to focus on me and every interaction that I come across with a person as I live in this life and to be generous and to be kind and to practice what I preach and to hope that people see what I do, just as I've been inspired by others. Everything we're talking about, everything I'm saying right now is because other people have inspired me to do that. They
Yeah.
touched me enough to be like, okay, spiritual people, religious people who have good character and, aren't full of it. And I'm like, I want to be like that. I want to be good. I don't want to be bad. And I think
So
this
here's a
also
question.
requires, so
Yeah. Sorry. So no, no,
I
go
also
ahead.
think this requires like a significant amount. I think if we want to protect more children in the future, men and women who are victims of rape and abuse, we need to like emphasize the importance of inner work, shadow work. Like we all have so much shit we need to sort of excavate
Yeah.
and clean within ourselves to even get to this point. And
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
lifelong journey. I don't think it's because I just think it starts within. It just starts with you, is what I don't know if I can. I can't be worried about. It's not worried. I know that's not what you're saying, but it's like this bigger society and world. It's just going to be a lot. We can just continue to what we're doing in a podcast. I think, this could potentially get someone interested enough to say, I don't want to be hopefully like a jerk anymore, or I want to be a better person. You never know, you know? It's the
Yeah.
small things that make a big difference, in my personal opinion, taking it down because I can't worry. I really can't worry about all this. I think I want people in America to understand that, you want to blame the elites when it is a mirror to me. I think it very much is like we put these people in power at the end of the day. We put Donald Trump in power. More than half of the United States put someone like Donald
Yeah.
Trump in power. And he was saying crazy shit before these files came out. It's nothing new. Like
And
other than
yeah, and
like
there were
more
allegations that
disgusting shit, like
he
all of these
wrote
people
what
know.
like yeah,
They know.
it
People
wasn't something
know.
new.
So if you know and you're acting surprised, that's something you have to do in your work. You have to act, why am I naive? Respectfully. Why am I
Why am
you
I
know how many creepy
normalizing
uncles there
abuse?
are, brothers? Like, I'm sorry, it's just like this, and also, sorry, I'm gonna go on one of my rants. But on the flip
No,
side too, we
go
talk
ahead.
about men, but how many women are co-conspirators? How many women turn a blind eye to their
Oh, I
boyfriends
have a
or
story
their
about that.
husbands or their sons who do fucked up shit? A lot of women are
Yeah.
complicit in this. Many women,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I was saying earlier with Epstein Files or any of this. How many of these women, Ghislaine, so many women, his
Yeah.
PR publicist woman, like so many women, wives of these men, they know who they married, like
Yeah.
maybe I just don't, it's just they turn a blind eye because they wanted a certain lifestyle, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know,
And it's normalized in
it is
many
normalized.
circles that, it's almost it's a thing that happens. And that goes back to the secrecy and the shame and the
Yeah.
normalization, which escalates the practices and gives it the veneer of boys being boys. What the fuck does that mean?
It's
Like,
disgusting.
yeah,
And
like
you're hurting your
especially
son's
in
soul. Like, yeah, like the lack of, sorry, it's just the lack of accountability with this behavior. And you're for, because that woman hasn't, and those parents haven't done the inner work. And now they're projecting that onto their son. And, like, and then you mentioned this too when we talked about it earlier, just quickly about how the culture encourages a lack of raising consciousness. Like it encourages the movies that we watch, the music that we listen to, the leaders that we have. It's everywhere, It's like
yeah.
what we're saying is like woo-woo stuff. When I would not, I would say what we're saying is the right stuff in many ways, right? Like,
This is the normal. If one tunes into their soul frequency, the origin, the core, the essence of it, what we're saying is normal. Everyone is equal on a soul level. We're dignified beings. No one should be abused or subject to exploitation, regardless of who they are. Period. We do not normalize violence, abuse, exploitation, bullying. The list goes on. There are a lot of cultural signals now in our society that normalizes that.
yeah.
And that's why it grew to the scale that it grew. And there are networks that are benefiting. And you always say that. You said what? It's like $180 billion
Yeah,
business,
close to $200 billion
trafficking.
human sex trafficking industry. You think that's just the elites? That's what I get like, it's just come on. It's just, and so many of these kids, because people aren't doing the inner work, because they are all of these people who abuse have been generally abused themselves, right? Like there is that pattern. Like many of them who've been, that was the case with a lot of the Catholic Church priests. They were like, yeah, I
Right.
did it, but they did it to me. It's like this, there is this ritualistic element of it too, right? Like of it is normalized. Let's normalize, even though we're normalizing that something that clearly has damaged so many people.
And to your point,
So
because these people didn't do the inner work, because inner work equals to ruthlessly facing the most painful
yeah,
part of you. And to do that is to sit with the abuse, to sit with the moment where you were exploited, and to sit with it and accept it as part of your story and work with it, with professionals, with whatever you need to do. Because if that is not done, then as you said, this turns into a cycle of
yeah,
repeated normalization that this happens. It's normal what I went through. I'm sorry, it's not normal what you went
yeah.
through. And no one else should go through the same thing. But this reminds me of a story when you talked about many women are complacent or part of it, or in some ways. And I'm thinking more about the normalization of certain practices that should not be normalized. I was in Paris once, and it was just right after I gave birth. So I was physically weak, but my kid was probably 4 months. Like I'm not, and this is important because of the following. I was sitting in a park, and in front of me on another bench, there was this couple, and the guy was yelling and screaming at the girl. Both are, I would say, the girl is probably in her early 20s, and then he is probably in his early 30s, at least. You know, he's yelling at her. He's screaming at his body language is a bit aggressive. And he's like, dominate almost like dominating her physically. Like she's sitting next to him, extremely small, looking at the floor, at the ground, and like just listening, and she's crying. Okay. She didn't say a word. So I'm observing this, and people are passing by, and they would slow down and look at them because he's loud.
Mm.
And I was just looking at them, really disturbed because this is ongoing now for at least 5 minutes. And in my head, I'm like, for the next 10 minutes, if this continues, I have to say something.
Yeah.
And I noticed again, Hawa, a lot of people, mostly men, they would, when they walk by, they would stop and turn back while the women just continued.
Mm.
Like they wouldn't even slow down. I think the men, I don't know, I don't want to like psychologically explain it, but it's almost like instinctive when you see a situation where there seems like to be an aggressor, like there's something that becomes alive in you and you want to, scan
Mm.
the area. It's almost instinct because they would slow down, look, and when it seems like they read the situation, look safe enough, and they continue, while women didn't even stop. Anyways, at some point, this lady wanted to stand up. He holds her from her wrist and he pushes her down, and she keeps on trying to move away. She wants to walk away, and he's pulling her. And then he stands and follows her. So at that point, that's when I was like, I scanned the area. I'm like, is there, physically strong enough of a man to like, if I scream, he would come and help me?
Yeah.
Because I went up to this man and I just like yelled at him in English. They were speaking in French to each other. But I yelled at him and I'm like, I've been observing you for the past 15 minutes. I don't give a shit what's happening between the two of you. You do not hold her back physically. If she needs to walk away from you, she walks away from you.
Mm.
And I was like, you're doing, he was taken back. Um, and that was surprising to me because I expected him to like become aggressive with me.
Yeah.
Um, and I told him, you're doing this in front of us. God knows only what you're doing behind closed doors.
Mm.
And he's like, don't say that. I was like, I'm gonna say that. You have to let her go. You have to let her go. If she needs to go, she goes. And then surely enough, she takes her backpack and she walks away and he starts following her, but now he's patting her on the back and she's trying to physically be away from him, but he's not touching, like he's not holding her back.
Yeah.
My point is this story happened. So I shared the story in a social setting in the Middle East where there is this lady who's probably 58 or 65-year old, like in that age range,
Hmm.
conservative, from a very high socioeconomic status, has at least, I think, like six children. Her daughter was sitting and her um, daughter-in-law. And I shared it intentionally to see their reaction because I'm like, that's not, I understand that social code. And if that scene had happened in the Middle East, you wouldn't interfere,
Yeah.
like it's a
Yeah. Yeah.
husband and wife. It's like, who are you? And surely enough, she was very uncomfortable as I was narrating how I intervened. And she said, you don't know what's happening between them. I don't think it's safe to interfere. And
Whatever.
that's when I said, I was like, I interfered because my hope is if something like that is happening to me in a public space, that someone would interfere.
Yes.
And exactly. So my
And
idea,
she'll remember
normalizing
you. Lubna, she'll remember that. I have no
the
doubt.
the late
No,
the girl,
yeah,
the
that
lady that
lady,
was yelled at.
Yes, no, no, no,
Yeah,
not her, the woman that you helped. Like you were yelling at him, but I'm sure there was a sense of relief that fine. Yeah, like I don't know. I'm not trying
that
to say
someone
you
is
saw
seeing that
someone
there's
you saw. Like it's not in her head. It's not like she's yeah, like that you're one but that's what I'm saying. That is one good thing you did. That changes. Maybe it
yeah.
even impacted him potentially. Like
I
like
hope
that's
I
why I
hope
hate
my
when people just walk around like it's just this is why shit is happening. Because no one,
Yeah, and then and
yeah.
then when I share that like with loved ones or close family members, not a lot, but like they're like, this is not safe what you did. Like he could have hurt you. You have a baby. I'm a vulnerable. Like I'm not 6 foot man with muscles. Or like I'm a postpartum woman who can barely like do things at that point. So, but the point in all of this is not that the normalization of abuse. In my opinion, that was an instance where there was abuse. I don't know again what's happening between them. Maybe she cheated on him. Maybe she tried to, kill him. I don't care. I'm saying in that particular context, in that particular moment of time, he was physically aggressive towards her, holding her back, yelling at her. So why is this normal? People are seeing it and passing by. Why? And then but this is another layer into it, which is the bystander effect. And we know from a story, I think it happened in New York, maybe in the 60s or 50s. I think they call it the Katie case, where there was this lady walking back home and she reached her building. And then there was this guy who was trying to rob her. And then I think he raped her and then eventually stabbed her to death. The point is, the whole ordeal took a while, at least 20 to 30 minutes. She was yelling, she was screaming, calling people to help. And apparently, witnesses later, when they give their reports to the police, they were observing that from the windows, many of them in that building, but no one intervened. And when they asked them why, they're like, we thought someone else will intervene. So from that case, it became the bystander effect, which is a concept in psychology about the sense, the perception of distributed responsibility when it comes to moral standing. When you see abuse in public, there is that assumption that someone else will step in. So if no one steps in, which the chances become and the odds become increasingly more that no one will step in because everyone is thinking the same way, then this turns into normalization because we see more and more of these abuses around us. So again, if anything, this is an invitation for people to step up.
Yeah.
Really, if you see something that is in instinctively feels wrong, someone is being abusive or aggressive towards someone, trust your intuition. Trust it.
Yeah.
Step in, say something, intervene, break the cycle. There are a lot of cases, especially about children who have been trafficked, that walk around in society with their traffickers, with the criminals for years, and no one intervenes. No one helps them.
It's
And I'm
patriarchal.
sure,
Yeah. Sorry.
no, I'm sure there are signs that these children don't belong to these abusive adults that walk with them. The body language speaks. You see a miserable child, you see an abused child, but again, normalizing the abuse that he's a difficult teenager. Maybe it's not a difficult teenager. Maybe this is a trafficked young lady who is working the hours for this pimp now,
Mm.
and you picked up on something real. Um, it's not that simple. Again, I know our safety matters, but to your point about individual steps matter, I understand there's the spiritual part, the inner work, but there's also our external role in society. When you see abuse, as small as it is, as big as it is, I think we should step in any possible way.
Yeah.
And the last,
100%.
oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
No,
No,
you go. You
no,
said last.
please
No,
go.
no.
No, the last thing, because I regret the following story. I did not step in one particular scenario that happened maybe 5, 6 years ago, and I shall never forget it because in my head, this probably now has grown into something worse. So we were in New York, my husband and I walking around, and then I see this mother who is so upset with her own kid, who's probably maybe 4 or 5 years old. She's holding her hand, crossing the street. And then the kid is just being a kid, like, I don't know, she's stomping her feet, unhappy about something. Um, and the mother was just so aggressive, yanking her hand, pushing her, shoving her around. And I was across the street. So bear in mind, this is like I think a two-way road. And then I see them as they're entering a store, the kid has calmed down. Okay? There's no reason to do anything. The mother just stares at the kid that way, holding her hand, and then just aggressively pulls the kid's hair, the girl's hair, and the girl holds her head and starts crying. So I'm like, this motherfucking bitch.
Mm.
She just harmed that child. Um, and I was going to cross the street. And then my husband held me. They had just entered, and then I see them disappear into the store. So by the time my brain processed the incident, and my brain tells me, okay, you have to go and say something. Because again, this mother is doing that to this child in public. Can you imagine what she's doing to her in
Yeah,
behind closed doors?
exactly.
So, and I didn't intervene. By
Yeah.
the time I looked at my husband, like, did you see that? He's like, what are you talking about? I explained the story. Obviously, they disappeared. And he's like, no, don't intervene. And I'm like, why? I got even more irritated. He's like, no, you don't want to intervene. You never, like, because again, that mother could be, batshit crazy, who
Yeah.
has a knife and might stab me. This is New York
Yeah.
ultimately.
Yeah.
So again, the calculation becomes about preserving me, my safety, all that bullshit. But here I am, I'm seeing a child, a vulnerable being, being abused in front of me. So that story will never leave me because I genuinely believe, Hawa, I had an obligation to do something in that moment.
Mm.
And I didn't. And again, this is an invitation for people who are out there. You are seeing things. Even if you pretend you're not, you're picking up on things. And it's our role in society to help the vulnerable. Otherwise, it will come back and harm you or someone you love. And
Yeah.
that's how the cycle, the karma, all of it, that's how it works. What harms others harms us. And unfortunately, this is the only language people really understand when it's so self-centered, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's the
No, I'm in complete agreement with you. And I've intervened many a times, and it was always interesting to me how everyone around me was like shocked. They like look, I don't know if you encounter that when you were in France or in Paris when that happened, if other people looked at you like, oh my God, someone's actually doing something. And which is also just kind of interesting because it goes back to what you're saying. They people just assume what someone else will will handle it, is what you're saying. But then when someone handles it, they're kind of in shock.
Yeah. Yeah.
Secondarily, like it just goes back to why all this abuse is happening with children and women and everyone is because abusers are protected. Abusers are always given the benefit of the doubt. You know, like even with
Yeah.
the woman, the example that you gave with the woman in the Middle East, she's saying, you don't know what's going on. You can't get involved. But it's also
Yeah.
part of it is just like he's the patriarchal figure. He knows what's best. Who knows? Maybe she was acting up. It's always people excusing the abuser. That's what's
Yeah.
upsetting me. Every day it's like you don't know. They could be fighting. It could be a marital spout, a spat, or a relationship spat, or you don't know, maybe the mother's been working too many hours. I don't care. And also, why is it within public spaces? What happened to decorum? So it's okay for the abusers to just act out however they want, and we just are okay with it because we're in public space. I did not, that's not the contract I didn't sign up to be in public space and not expect, we expect people to act out, and that's okay. You know, we're not okay with homeless people. We all are like
Right.
complaining when we see a man or a woman on the bench just chilling, minding their own business, or a sick person. But as soon as someone is hitting a girl or grabbing a woman or yelling at a, yanking a kid by the hair, oh, don't, you know, who knows? I understand it is valid. I do agree with you. You don't know how these people will react to you. Fair. I generally take it if I'm in a public space with many people around, the probability of anything happening to me is ideally, particularly in cities like Paris or New York, is okay, right? So I'll take the risk. But generally speaking, the undercurrent for me is just like protect the abuser. It's a subconscious
Yeah.
thing. We have
Yeah.
the man, I don't want to get involved with the man, because at the end of the day, historically, public spaces, particularly in the Middle East and in Africa, right? Like public space is male space. Women shouldn't
Yeah.
even be there.
Right.
Women and children, even if it's a mom and a child, they have no business being there. Where's the male chaperone, right?
Yeah.
So this is why it is patriarchal. It is, you know, it is spiritual. I think many of these people have been, because we didn't go too into the spiritual part of it yet, but it's like, I do believe these people who've been abused, didn't do the inner work, are become abusers. There is some spiritual overtaking. There is a dark force that overtakes these people. You know, you see it. One example that I think people can kind of, we can use as an example is when you see someone who gets super drunk, you know, and they're like bad
Yeah.
drunk and
Yeah.
they get abusive and everyone's like he's not like that or she's not like that, you know. We all, I've known people where they get drunk and I'm like that person is so nice during the day, but when they drink they're mean, you know. They hit, some people hit their families, they become evil drunks. That is a spirit, you, something is taking over you know. And you can create, of course there is biological, medical, alcohol does these things, it lowers your inhibitions, but something deeper there for me that I'm still trying to process in connection with the Epstein files and all this abuse we're speaking of is that something takes over these people, you know?
Yeah.
And I can only assume it's staying in this negative, constant state, right? And sometimes and for some, it's more extreme. Like, you know, I think, and I do think there's like and I think power facilitates that, you know, this, when you have power at that level, there is an element of I can get away with anything I want, you know,
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
way that, even though I do believe that this is a lot more of a prolific thing than we're willing to admit, I do
Yeah.
think particularly at the elite level, you know, with like the cannibalism, this is just so crazy. The cannibalism, all this type, the rape, I can only assume a part of it is, you know, they get eroded, their sort of soul is eroded over time, that they need more of a hit. They need crazy, crazy, crazy stuff that I can only assume it's like, yes, some sort of takeover of their soul, you know? And again, I emphasize this, it's like it's not an excuse. These still people should absolutely be held
Yeah.
accountable. Um, but it's just more like we have to there's a reckoning here. There's some reckoning we have, not even from a political perspective. For me, it really
Yeah.
is some dark entities. It's the same thing with alcohol consumption, drug use. You know, something happens, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
When you voluntarily, because it starts voluntarily, unless someone has like severe case of addiction. But I'm saying when before the addiction becomes addiction, it's a choice to consume these things that put you in a mental, emotional, psychological space where you are vulnerable to these dark forces and energies and um whether they're external or internal, depending on how people view it. But the evil does exist in a sense that we see people committing violence and unspeakable things to other people, causing pain and suffering in the process. So people can protect themselves by nipping it in the bud early on, not allowing themselves to engage in these practices and indulge in them to such a point where self-control is no longer in existence. So that's my sort of positive note at the very end.
Yeah.
To a very extremely disturbing topic that, as you said, we have to reckon with, work with, and understand. Any positive thoughts to leave our listeners with, Hawa?
Yeah, my belief is that if we want a kinder, better world as we continue to go down this dark time period, is, I don't mean to be sort of repeating myself and saying the same thing, but do the inner work,
Yeah.
meditate, prayer, like get your shit together internally, love yourself, and seek your purpose and do everything that you can to mitigate any negative sort of emotions and traits, and you'll be fine. I think you have to commit
Yeah.
to that journey and that path if you want to avoid, you will be safe if you are willing to do the inner work. I think that's my hope for myself and others. I think in these trying times is that, to love yourself, to just get
That's a
rid of the
beautiful hope.
self-loathing and just love
Yeah.
yourself tremendously and know that, what goes down must come up. Nothing is, as much as I'm saying we're in the dark ages, anything can happen, and to just have hope.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful thought. Thank you for leaving us with that note.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
with that,
Yeah.
until next
Stay
time,
searching and stay
and stay
unscripted.
unscripted.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.
And that's a wrap on this week's Unscripted conversation. Don't forget to subscribe to Unscripted with Lubna and Hawa wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. We'll be back with a brand new one next Wednesday. Until then, keep it unfiltered, unapologetic, and unscripted.